Let's dive right into this explainer, where we're going to unpack the fascinating evolution of American evangelical end times theology. Have you ever wondered how a really specific theological framework shifted from people just, passively waiting for the end of the world to actively seeking political dominion over it? It's a completely wild ride through history, theology, and culture, and we have some absolutely incredible source material to guide us today. On the agenda today, we've got 5 key areas. 1. The pop culture apocalypse. 2. The roots of dispensationalism. 3. America in biblical prophecy. 4. The Seven Mountain Mandate. And 5. The legacy of the end.
Section 1. The pop culture apocalypse.
Picture this. It's the Cold War. The threat of nuclear annihilation is literally looming over everyone. So the idea that the world was rapidly careening toward a pre-written cataclysmic end felt incredibly real to a lot of people. It was a provocative thought, and honestly, it completely changed American culture in the 1970s. Tens of millions. That is a mind-boggling number, right? But that's exactly how many copies of Hal Lindsey's 1970 book, The Late Great Planet Earth, were sold. This wasn't just some popular religious book. It actually became the best-selling nonfiction book of the entire 1970s. Band & Books even bought the rights and put it in grocery stores and airports. They took a niche theological text and turned it into a global blockbuster. It eventually even got a film adaptation narrated by Orson Welles. What's really fascinating here is the evolution of Lindsey himself. The guy went from being a Mississippi River tugboat captain in the 1950s to the world's most famous apocalyptic author. He managed to convince millions of people that the rapture, which is the sudden disappearance of true believers, could happen by 1988, tying it directly to the 1948 establishment of the State of Israel. He framed global politics as an absolute zero-sum game of good versus evil. Section 2. Roots of Dispensationalism. To really understand Lindsey's massive success, we've got to look at the intellectual roots. The crucial point here is this specific theology, premillennial dispensationalism. I know, it's a massive mouthful, but basically it's a framework that insists on a stark separation between the Christian church and Israel. It divides human history into dispensations, or specific eras, and predicts a period of immense global tribulation, overseen by an antichrist, followed by a literal battle of Armageddon. Now, the growth of this theology didn't just happen overnight. As you can see, it originated way back in the 19th century with an Irishman named John Nelson Darby. Then it was structured and popularized for the masses by the Scofield Reference Bible in 1917. Because it was published by Oxford University Press, it was highly accessible. And finally, decades later, in 1970, it was essentially weaponized for pop culture by Hal Lindsey. What's absolutely vital to understand here is that early leaders of this movement, like the evangelist D.L. Moody, had what historians call a quietist approach, because they believed the world was going to end soon anyway. They prioritized evangelism and saving souls above literally everything else. They even explicitly ignored massive social issues like segregation. It was very much a save the passengers on a sinking ship mentality, which, as we'll see, sharply contrasts with where the movement was eventually headed politically. Section 3. America in Biblical Prophecy. So, as this theology grew here in the United States, a massive debate emerged. Where exactly does America fit into the biblical apocalypse? If you dig into vast archives like Sermon Index online, you'll see theologians intensely debating this. Some folks want to read the U.S. into the prophecies as a central hero, while others point out that the Americas are completely absent from ancient biblical texts. While a lot of popular books desperately try to force the U.S. into the center of prophecy, renowned theologian John F. Walvoord argued the exact opposite. He stated that because world political power in the end times is supposedly centered in the Mediterranean, America will actually likely decline. He thought the country might suffer internal corruption, kind of like ancient Babylon, and end up playing only a subordinate role. This debate leads to some pretty hilarious pushback too. Pastor James W. Knox points out that when preachers claim the eagle's wings mentioned in the book of Revelation must mean the USA is swooping in to save the day, they're kind of forgetting something. Nations from Mexico to Germany to Albania all use the eagle as their symbol. As he puts it, we really shouldn't let national pride trick us into inserting our own country into ancient texts. So, if we aren't the main character, why did Walvoord think America hadn't been judged yet, despite its flaws? Well, he suggested that America has only been spared divine judgment so far because of its historic financial support for global missionaries and its safe harbor and kind treatment of the Jewish people. But he warned that this protection was definitely not permanent.
Section 4. The Seven Mountain Mandate.
So how do we get from passively waiting for the rapture to actively trying to run the government? That brings us to the Seven Mountain Mandate. This is a real game changer. It's a dominionist ideology that completely flipped the script. Instead of escaping a doomed world, this framework instructs believers that they have a strict mandate to actively conquer and dominate society before the end even comes. Proponents of this view target 7 distinct spheres of influence: family, religion, education, media, arts and entertainment, business, and government. The goal isn't just to be a good influence within them, right? The explicit aim is to assert total Christian dominion over culture, business, and politics, shaping the entire nation from the top down. We can trace this whole idea back to a 1975 origin story involving evangelical leaders Loren Cunningham and Bill Bright. But it was supercharged around the year 2000 by a man named Lance Wallnau. He's the one who bridged this abstract theology directly to modern political action. He linked it heavily with the New Apostolic Reformation and later started directly supporting political figures, framing them as divinely appointed. And if you're sitting there wondering why this matters today, well, the numbers speak for themselves. A 2024 poll indicated that a staggering 41% of American Christians now believe in the principles of this Seven Mountain Mandate. It has moved all the way from the theological fringe right into the center of cultural and political strategy. Section 5. The Legacy of the End. Let's wrap up by examining the lasting legacy of all these shifting ideas. Critics, particularly scholars looking back at the last 50 years, argue that the massive pop culture success of writers like Hal Lindsey created a sort of hollowed-out pop dispensationalism. It basically ignored all those deep, complex theological distinctions of the past, just for the sake of political expediency and selling millions of paperbacks. Yet, despite those critiques, the endless search for meaning online, whether we're talking about massive sermon databases or modern podcasts, proves something important. The desire to find a structured explanation for global chaos remains an incredibly powerful human force. People just want to know that someone, somewhere, is in control of it all. But the real-world legacy of this theological evolution is absolutely profound. We now have a significant subset of the population that views global conflicts, especially in the Middle East, as a literal, zero-sum biblical battle. In this worldview, international diplomacy and compromise aren't just difficult, they're actually seen as actively defying God's prophetic timeline. I want to leave you with this question to take away. As we watch these beliefs actively shape our modern political landscape and drive this quest for dominion over the 7 mountains of culture, do these movements reflect the inevitable march of divine prophecy, or simply the human desire for ultimate control? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.